And Jose, what advice would you give to parents whose 15-year-old son would no longer want to attend Mass? Whew. Yeah, that's a difficult one. There are so many different reasons why a 15-year-old boy might not want to attend Mass. Um, we'll start kind of from the outside and go in. So sometimes the the 15-year-old boy is is kind of being influenced by friends or by the culture or media or anything of that sort, where they just kind of speak about it in a um, it's being spoken about in a negative way, and it doesn't seem to be cool. And 15-year-olds, really all they want is to be cool. And so church isn't cool, I only do cool things, I'm not going to church. If that's the case, really you just tell your 15-year-old, I don't care if it's not cool, get in the car, we're going to church. Because it's really an immaturity that's happening within him, and this is a stage in his life. And so you just make him go to church. Kind of the next layer in, sometimes, especially at about 15 years old, there can be some difficulty with teachings of the church and the young person. Sometimes it's they've fallen into certain sins, or they're attracted to certain sins that the church condemns, and they're just not they almost feel uncomfortable about it because they're approaching God and they believe in God, but they know that they're not doing what God wants. And so there's a kind of shame that wants to hide, and part of that hiding is expressed in a desire not to go to church. Then sometimes, quite simply, the 15-year-old is bored at church because the music isn't very good and the homily is not very interesting, and they just don't like it. And that's a real thing that happens sometimes. If that's the case, the best thing to do is to basically catechize them, teach about what is happening at the Mass. Why is this important? Why is it beautiful? Why is it good? Why should we be interested in this? Even if the music isn't great, even if the preaching isn't very good, even if, whatever it may be, why is it that we still love this? And so it's that, in that case, it's just more of a catechizing more. There can also be this thing that happens right around that 15-year-old kind of adolescent period, in which a 15-year-old or a young person is trying to become an adult. They're trying to say, like, no, I want to do the adult things. And very simply said, I don't know if this is the case with the young man that you're specifically thinking about, but sometimes the men in his life don't take faith seriously. They may still show up to Mass, they may still do the externals, but with the younger generations, they don't want to just do something externally. They want, if they're going to do it, they want to mean it. And so they see the men at church, or the men in their lives, going through the motions, but not really believing it. Or at least they don't perceive that the person really believes it. Like outside of church, the person never talks about church or God or anything like that. And so this obviously isn't that important of a thing. Therefore, if I want to be an adult like these adults, I need this to not be important in my life. And if it's not important in my life, I don't want to just go. And so it can be expressed in that way. And so the response to that is actually to talk about how your faith is important to you as a man in his life. Whatever role you may have, is to really stand up and just say, like, yeah, this is why. I find those to be the typical way, or the typical reasons that a young man won't want to go to Mass. There can be a handful of other ones that are a little bit more unique, but those tend to be the kind of the central ones. But definitely, at 15 years old, if the kid's still living in your house, you can just say, you live under my roof, you go to Mass on Sunday. That's how this happens. So I think actually saying this is a rule of the house, just like any of the other rules of the house, this is one of them. And so you're going to go. And then really speaking to them and opening up your own heart, and how what the faith means to you, what why you go to mass, why you love mass, and why you want him to go. And even speaking a little bit about your own struggles as well, like, hey, yeah, I go to mass and I have these difficulties, but you know what? I go to confession and I receive God's forgiveness and I keep fighting. That opening up about our own weakness to young people, especially right at that 15-year-old age, they're old enough to handle that reality that, wow, these adults in my life aren't perfect, right? They already think you don't know anything, so you can at least show them a little bit of humility and say, yeah, you know what, I make mistakes, but teaching them that I make these mistakes, I go before God, I confess my sins, and I keep striving, and I turn to the Mass and the Eucharist for strength to live my life how I really want to as a man, and that ends up being the most powerful thing. If they have a man who they can clearly see is striving to live a life of faith in their life, then they're far, far, far more likely to continue to live their faith. Great question, Jose.